welcome to the Produce Champion podcast. Today we will chat with Jonathan about his role in the produce industry. So let's dive in over to Nate.
Thanks so much, Ever. It's a treat always to work with you. Friends, we got a guest that you are just going to really enjoy. In the process of taking produce from the field all the way through the supply chain to your table, one of the many places that can stop is at some kind of a process where it is sliced and diced or chopped up. And so we've invited Jonathan Buettner. Jonathan, he's got a very ample background in what's machinery and a little bit of dabble in software. Jonathan, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Nate. Always fun, and it was great to see you at IFPA even this past weekend, and continue to learn from you.
It was a treat. It just seemed like well over 50% of the show we were able to just kind of track together. And that's always a treat to not be solo at these shows. So I really enjoyed your company, and I really enjoyed our time. While we were there, we talked a little bit about what you do and where you fit in the spectrum of produce and its supply to customers. And so you are involved with machinery in basically the stuff that slices and dices. So tell us a little bit about that. I don't need to tell you what you do. Why don't you tell us what you do?
Yeah, so Buettner Processing Solutions, we just opened in June, and it was really from a desire to holistically support the grower, packer, shipper all the way through to the just value-added processor. I have a heavy background in industrial food cutting. I mean, slice, dice, shred. I was doing that when we met. I think it was PMA Chicago 5 years ago. I've been friends ever since. Yeah. I transitioned through a few different things, including, as you mentioned real briefly there, some software, and worked for Grub Market. Learned a ton on the wholesaler side. Some people would say, hey, accounting's boring. It's essential, right? We got to make sure that we're doing that side right, because it enables everything else. Yeah, but learning a lot more of wholesaling and some of that. And I one thing I noticed was a very big disconnect sometimes throughout the market, and that transfer of knowledge between something ending up in the field with a grower, packer, shipper, it going to someone that had capability of processing, and it ending up ultimately in a kid's mouth, a K through 12 program, doing some work in that, or if it's on a restaurant table, or if we're picking it up at our local grocery store of choice.
So let's think about that for just a second. So what we're talking about is at the farm level, it's machinery like attachments that go to tractors, maybe even the tractor itself. It is whether it's something to scrape up, something to dig up, something to turn over soil, or maybe it's a piece of machinery that the grower is taking that and doing some kind of a value added. So where we would see that as consumers is, the grocery store and the dice stuff. We'd see that there, but we'd also see it like in our little pouches that our kids are eating, like the grab and go pouches that have applesauce or that have anything, any of this machinery and processing that's involved. You have something to do with that, right?
Yeah, I work with a manufacturer that does a wonderful job specifically on the apple stuff that you mentioned, right? That's Karenko out of Santa Rosa, California. If we back up and look at something with those multiple applications like carrots, right? I work with a wonderful company called Univerco. They're actually out of Quebec, out of Canada. Right. And one of the reasons that Buettner Processing Solutions partnered with them was their ability to take care of the large project. My background with food cutting was up and down the 99, with the multinationals. But they will step in and they will supply a harvester and equipment that goes along with Grandpa's tractor. And that got me really excited because, as we know, economies of scale are powerful. We lose about 10,000 individual farms a year in the United States. And the first time that statistic hit me, it really affected me emotionally, to be honest. Some of that, it goes to land for housing. We're a growing, population. Some of it's farms getting gobbled up by larger. And some of it's just people throwing their hands in the air and saying, this isn't, I can't do this anymore. I need help, a way to make it support my family. And I really enjoy doing that. When we're pulling carrots out of the ground, we will supply wash lines, through Univerco, same as the harvesting equipment. They like having one face, one guy to call if something goes wrong, right? And then I have a project with that in New Mexico where offhand we were reviewing CAD drawings for a wash line. And they just said, background info, we'd love to get into the K-12 program, here in Arizona. And I said, well,
what's the K-12? Like, you're talking schools?
I'm talking schools, being able to sell directly into that. A lot of small farmers like the ability to know who they're feeding, and our next generation is, I don't know, probably the proudest demographic for farmers, to be honest. Being able to supply healthy food to, the local school district, and it scared them. And I made the joke. I said, hey, it's hard to sell a donkey carrot to a school, isn't it? And for those that don't know, those are large processing carrots. It's kind of a pet name.
Huge.
They're the size of your forearm. They're massive, right? And it's a blast. I've watched those get diced up for IQF at 32,000 pounds an hour.
All right. When you say IQF, what are we talking about? That's like, is that frozen? Is that right?
Yep, that's frozen. So that's your diced carrots that you see in the retail shop all across, and that happens at economy of scale, very large. In context of this farmer, I said, hey, it is hard to sell a donkey carrot. Imagine that 6 or 12-year-old just gnawing on one of those.
Big old
but
arm.
A carrot, yeah, it's as big as them, right?
Yeah.
A carrot stick is probably something that K-12 program is buying. And I said, hey, some of this equipment, you're already building a wash line. If we add on a dicer, a shredder to do some of this stuff, you might only be looking at a $40,000 or a $60,000 additional CapEx budget. And this was a project already in the realm of a USDA grant. So there was grant money there for them to add on to that. And that's a lot of what I'm doing, is trying to educate and help some of those farmers that don't know the first place to go. And some of them have those dream stage, right? Of, I would love to do this. My brand, my farm, we'd love to be involved in X. But they don't think that it's possible. They think the door's infinitely shut. And often that's not the case, but it does take being creative and sometimes working with someone that's there to back up and look at 30,000 foot view.
All right. So before we go any further, let's just go real quick to a commercial to our sponsors, and we got the word from them, and then we'll come right back, and I've got a couple questions for you, Jonathan.
Fantastic.
California Andai Farms, una deliciosa interrupción a una ensalada aburrida. Si quiere cambiar lo que está haciendo con sus ensaladas, prueben unas endivias.
So there we go. The bilingual side of our show. We got the commercial in Spanish. That's great.
It was fun to walk by that booth with you at IFPA. That's a good memory.
They're an interesting story. I'm sure that they're kind of machinery. They plant the plant from seed. It grows, and they basically chop off the top. And they go in, they dig out the roots, and then they put them in a storage facility, and it grows in the dark. It's cool, and there's all kinds of machinery there. So I would like to just focus. Just imagine for just a moment that instead of talking to a farmer, or instead of talking to an engineer for a larger production, you're talking to somebody like my wife or maybe your wife, and saying, "Wow, so what? You do machinery. What are the key components that a consumer should be aware of or should care about?" I've got some ideas, but I'd like to hear from you, and then you can tell me if I'm wrong about mine.
If my wife was here, the first thing she'd say is it's terrible being in the grocery store with me. I can tell you if I walk up and I look at shredded product, Nate, I can tell you what manufacturer of, based on that quality, and that affects shrink, that affects pricing, right? So for me, it's the consumer cares about being able to put something in their mouth that's healthy for them, that's tasting well. It's got to be interesting. I think about some of the beautiful tricolor shred that hit the market, right, from quite a few manufacturers. It's beautiful, and I enjoy when I get to eat it. Those are two of those big things.
The rich depth of colors there just makes it a little bit more interesting. Probably depth of flexibility in the textures as well.
Yep, and I'm really behind the scenes on that. I've done some product development. There's some things that I've stumbled upon and talked to a couple different producers of, hey, do this. This would be cool. I mentioned one of them to you at IFPA, the mix of ricing cauliflower and shredding, and just how big of a devolve there was.
Relatively new popular thing, probably in the last few years, and ricing the cauliflower, and So one of the things that I thought about was the food safety side of it, the health side of it. When you're pulling carrots out of the ground or potatoes out of the ground, and you have the opportunity to wash them, clean them off, right then and there. And then since you're already doing that, then to take them from there and to chop them up or shred them up or whatever. And, those grab and go salads, those little trays sometimes that you can grab, and it'll have, your chopped up squash, or it'll have your veg already. You can just throw it into a fry pan. That's where the rubber meets the road. I mean, we can all talk about efficiencies, and we can talk about, probably, like you said, shrink, which shrink means it's lost due to either stuff going bad or not working. But we can talk about all that kind of stuff. But for the consumer, at the end of the day, what we're saying is we want to make sure you have a good tasting, safe product that you can feed to your family confidently. And so it's an important part of the entire supply chain of produce, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'd add what produce is for me after going on a decade in it is its relationships. And a lot of these small guys that I'm working with are selling some of that product, directly at their local farmers market. Their kids go to school with the people that are buying the produce from them, and there's that love of coming around that same thing. And being able to add, like I joked on the carrot stick versus the donkey carrot, something that's just a little bit more applicable sometimes to what the kids are going, I'll grab that for lunch. My daughter had carrot sticks in her packed lunch today, right? Is helping that brand continue to thrive and grow and expand. And I think at the end of that day, the robustness of the supply chain is something that we all talk about. It was a topic for me in some conversation at IFPA, and just allowing more players to do some of the same things.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think going forward, we're going to have another episode where we'll invite the folks from Univerco, maybe talk a little bit about some of the other companies that you're partnering with. But in general, folks, if you are a grower, if you're a farmer, and you're needing machinery, or if you're wanting to add another step in the process so that you can maybe get a little bit better return on what you're growing, those kinds of questions, Jonathan would be a great person to talk to, and I'm sure he would be glad to take some time with you. And so how do we find you, Jonathan? How does somebody get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm a small business like a lot of these people. I'd say reach out to you. You know everybody. I'm sure we can throw up my contact information on the end here. Find me on LinkedIn. Jump around. but a lot of what I'm doing is just word of mouth right now, to be honest. And it's a fun start to half a year in business.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being with us, folks. Take the time, please, to click there, subscribe. We are growing and we want to keep growing, and your support helps us to grow. So please click subscribe and mash that little bell button so that you get notified every time we put new content out. And we're always talking about produce, but we're focused on people. The people that grow it, the people that ship it, the people that transport it, and the people that consume it, like yourself. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.